Another Build It Live trailer. How are you? Today is an interesting day. It's been a weird day. I've actually already flown. I've already landed. I'm here and I have an amazing guest with me today, Jill.
I'm doing great. I didn't have such an exciting morning, but our interns have landed here this summer and they keep me hopping. So, yeah.
How exciting is that? Well,
Yeah.
for everybody that's joining us today, we have an amazing conversation. We're going to be talking whatever, eye roll, right? And it's going to be super fun. I can't wait to dive into this, Jill. This is, I think, a really big conversation for everybody in business today. Like
Right.
it's just something that's, what are we doing? I talk about this all the time. How are we thinking about that millennial marketplace, and how are we thinking about talking about what we should be doing? And I'm really excited to dive into it today. So, but
Mhm.
one of the cool things is I got Jill Chapman from Insperity with me today. We're gonna be talking about this. We're gonna be diving in. We're gonna be having some fun. So for all of you that are joining us in the audience today, get comfortable, jump into the chat. We're gonna be having some
Please.
fun. But as you
Yeah.
guys all know, I love to start off the conversation with a trivia question. So before I introduce you, Jill,
Okay.
one of the big things I like to do here is have a little bit of fun. And just to kind of start things off, I want to ask you a trivia question.
Mhm.
What is the current generational makeup, or what is the current generation that makes up the largest percent of the U.S. workforce? Now, that is the trivia question for today. There's two things that are going to happen today. One of them is whoever answers that question, Jill's going to give away two free tickets at the end. She's going to announce the lucky winners. Woo woo! And we also have a very special gift from Insperity today, which is a discount to Build It Live 2022 coming up July 27th through 29th. And the code for today, for those of you who are going to register, you're going to go to Build It Live and register, and you're going to put in Insperity 200, and you're going to get a discounted ticket to come to the event. So thank you, Insperity,
Yay.
for having us. But let's do this, Jill. So I want to introduce you because I'm super excited to have you with me. I think this conversation is amazing, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, senior performance consultant with
Mhm.
Insperity, and why
Mhm.
don't you give me a quick little background about yourself and what we're going to be talking about today?
Sure. So I've been talking for a lot of years, and I used to be a small business owner. And one day I was like, what is so different at work today than it was a few years ago? And I went to a conversation a few months later because I was really struggling with this. I was like, why do I feel like I talk all day long now? Why do I feel like I have to give extra energy
Yeah.
into my employees different than I used to? So I went to a conversation around this whole generation thing, right? I was like, that's it. In my small little office, in my small little company, I had somebody of every ilk, right? Across the board. And I began to say, it is different now as these generations. We've always had multiple generations in a workforce. That's not new, right? But the way that some of our generations have come up through the ranks and their schooling and everything else has made them different when they hit the workforce than generations that came before. Some of it is because of their age and the stage that they're in life, to be sure. But there are certain things that we bake into our people because we build it in through a values system, right? And your values show up at work through your behaviors. And the light bulb went off for me. And I was like, this is why it's a little bit different now. So we've been talking about this for a very, very, very long time. And that's part of my job here at Insperity is I get an opportunity to meet with people and to talk to them about improving their performance, easy for me to say, improving performance with their workforce. So it kind of all dovetails together.
It's interesting that you bring it up because I think that we miss the boat oftentimes whenever we're hiring. Being a business owner myself in a numerous amount of businesses, and really, one of the big things that I've always said is the process should empower the people to be successful, which builds a great culture, right? Like that's huge for me. And I really think
Mm-hmm.
that, for the longest, I didn't recognize, you know, the differences between the age of the people. I knew that the older generations needed more help, and that seemed to be like one of my first break fix company. Everybody was like, when I was getting into tech, they were like, "Hey, Dan, this IT thing, I don't know anything about it. Can you help me with it?" And that's really what's helped me start my first company. Was like, oh, there's a need here, right? But you don't
Mhm.
recognize that there are needs for those individuals as you become an employer that you have to contribute to make that culture work. And it's really interesting. So I'm curious to ask you a question because I'm
Sure.
very interested in this. Is the balance of power? Obviously, it's shifting. The
Mhm.
generational data is moving. And again, the trivia question today is kind of leading into you know workforce right now, right? So how is that changing and what are you seeing in that space, Jill?
Yeah, so,
Don't give away the trivia question. Don't give away
no,
the
I'm
trivia.
trying. That's why I'm trying to frame my answer to go, how do I say this without saying it? I will tell you this, that the makeup of Generation X, Y, and Z
Yep.
together creates a very, very large percentage of the population right now, the workforce right now, almost to a tune of about 80%. So now you got to figure out which in that group has the biggest percentage, but that connected, and that's what we call the connected generation. So kind of talking to your, why is this older generation struggling? Well, okay, when we came up, it was pencil and paper, right? I remember the first fax machine that I got in the office, right? Um, and I remember when email was, that's just a fad, that'll come and go, right? So of course we didn't grow up with some of these tools and the technology, so we're having to learn them as we go. But yet the connected generation, whether they grew up playing Pong, or whether they have, came out of the womb with, five smart devices attached to them or something like that, but they're much more connected, and that is where the power lies right now. The dynamic of the workforce is really by sheer numbers in their court.
I will say I have something to share. So I in my laptop bag have a number of pens and a smart device. So like I what you just
You
said.
bridge you bridge the gap right there, right?
I,
Yeah.
well, here's the thing: is I'm still carrying these around, but I don't know that I use them. And I hate to say this for everyone that's joining us today, but I still miss my Palm Pilot.
The Palm Pilot. Yeah, that one was a good one. But that was really my transition. I used that Palm Pilot to kind of transition from my day timer, right? Remember our day runners or the
Yeah, yeah,
Franklin
those are
Covey
those actually
scanners and all
folded
that?
quite nice. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. But guess what I've gone back to? There's just something in my person that likes to mark it off, likes to write it on the list and mark it off. It feels good to me. This is a way that I've always done a to-do list.
I bet
I'm
you
so
I can.
bad
I bet you
that
I
if
can
I
win.
do something, yeah, but if I do something and it wasn't on my to-do list, I'll write it on my to-do list just so I can mark it off. So I'm back to the paper mode, just to keep up with things.
Are you remarkable?
No,
You got to try it.
yeah,
I'm a paper and pen kind of guy. I actually have a notepad in here that I keep track of all my stuff. So I'm horrible like that. That and
yeah,
sticky notes. At least I was able to detach from sticky notes. But yeah, I know. I do them. I have them at the office, right? My wife has got all of them. She's still on that. But and I think that all those shifts and those changes, as fun as we're having with that
mhm,
conversation, and even just those little nuances, it makes a big difference. And I think that we have to make you know we a little bit more and understand what that means for expectations of the workforce. And what are
right.
you seeing in regards to expectations in this modern workplace?
Right. Well, I think what we've begun to recognize is just the way that we work has changed over the years. As I mentioned before, there were always multiple generations in a workforce. That's nothing new. But it used to be that the more mature workers were usually in the executive ranks. They were working on the executive floor, they ate in the executive dining room, they parked on the executive floor of the garage, and there wasn't a lot of mixing and mingling. And then somewhere along the way, we decided we need to smash our companies flat. Everybody needs to work together. We're all in it together. And so now we're rubbing elbows with people who don't come with I'm going to say the same belief system necessarily, right? Maybe culture aside, but kind of the same beliefs, or the glasses from which they look out at the world, through. And so we're rubbing up against them in these, what I like to call sandpaper moments, that we used to never pay attention to before, because we didn't have that, we weren't all in it in the same room at the same time. And so it
Yeah.
just made it much more apparent to us. It's always existed. It's just much more apparent because we see it all the time. And the biggest rub still remains when I talk to people is that rub between the boomers and the millennials. I mean, that's still part of the conversation, which I think is hilarious, because for a lot of us, those are our children, right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
we raise them. So why, when they come to work, do we go, what
yeah,
what is happening here? What's going on?
yeah.
So why are we amazed at some of the things that show up at work, when that's what we fed into them all along, right?
I often said, as I was building my business, I want to focus on skating to the puck where it's going. And one of
Hmm.
the big things was, is ensuring that, we focused on the modern buyer. And I think
Hmm.
that, during that time when we started having those conversations, we're like, all right, how do they want to buy? And to your point, I used to always say they're born with a cell phone and a social security number. So like they want things differently. And I was looking at it from the outgoing component of
Hmm.
it. It
Hmm.
was interesting to see the inflection point when they started to be attracted to the organization and then want to come and work for us, to see how we changed who we were to support that mechanism, right? Is
Okay.
because even though we were building something for them, we weren't fully embracing them in that, and really thinking out how do we actually implement and ingest the younger generation. Even though we were looking for to supply to them,
Hmm.
it was interesting how we weren't actually making it a cohesive infrastructure. And I'm not saying we didn't. There was just a lot of eye opening.
Right.
Wow. Okay. That's great. And I think, well, me and you were talking. I think you even said that there are several people that have those like, wow, I didn't know I was doing that moment. And
Hmm. Hmm.
and I think that you have to really take stock of your current landscape internally and understand the type of company you are. What kind of ideas do you have there, Joe?
Yeah. So, I think we've moved to a place where most of us as business leaders are getting comfortable with the idea that it's as important for us to market to our clients, or users, as it is to market to the workforce, right? It's the same mechanisms, it's the same ideas. Instead of saying, why should you use your product or service, it's, why should you work for my company, right?
Yeah,
And why should you come here? Why should you stay? And so we've built this idea of the career consumer, right? And they consume our workplace just like they might consume a product or service out in the marketplace. And so when you start to think like that, and you think, I need to appeal to them in the same way that I would do these sorts of things, uh, for my end user, my consumer, it makes you look at things a little bit differently, think about them a little bit differently, and then pay attention to what's important. But I will tell you, it doesn't matter what generation you are, there are certain things that are universal, certain things that all employees want from their employer. We all want a chance to grow. We want to have some opportunity for development in some form or fashion.
right,
We all want to have access to be heard, and uh, have valid contribution, make a valid
right.
contribution. We all want to know that we really are contributing. So we need to have a line of sight to, what is it that I do, and how does that help move the needle for the organization? So regardless of generation, I think that those are some of the expectations of the employees. And then how you deliver that, though, is maybe multi-generational in a way that speaks to that particular generation, in a way in which they understand. Because I mean, we can talk about this stuff all day, but I still like an email. I prefer an email probably. I really prefer to talk to you face to face, or maybe on the phone, but an
Yeah,
email is good. Gen Gen X, pretty much email, kind of thing. I can remember when there were still memos, right? I can
Yeah.
remember those days, the precursor. But I would like to be in person. If I can't be in person, a good, um, well-crafted email would
Yeah.
be appropriate. And I start to think about the generations coming up after us, the IMing, right? The texting at work
Yeah.
and how important that is. And I will promise you, I can get up from my desk and we have the little IMing capabilities here, but I don't go to check that to see if somebody IM'd me when I'm away from my desk. And so when I'll go to log on my computer, brrr, all these people who tried to IM me during the day, I was like, well, I hope it wasn't important because I didn't even see that till just now. Um, but then when I start to think about the younger generation that's just now entering the workforce, and they
Yeah.
call them Gen Z, right? Well, what do they talk? They talk in emojis and GIFs. And I will get things from my son, and I'm like, I don't even know what that's saying. I, are you making fun of me? Is that supposed to be funny? It's not funny. I don't even understand it. I don't know what this is. And so one day I was driving and I was hit with this idea. I was like, man, it's like we're from a communication standpoint, we're going backwards, right? We're going back to the hieroglyphics and the cave writing, with the pictures to tell the story. And I was like, man, when that shows up at work, though, because it is so imprecise in my view. Um, we used to get messed up when somebody'd send an email all in caps, or in the wrong
Oh,
order or something like that.
I still love
And
those
so,
emails.
right. So what are we going to do when we get a GIF? Like they just send, is it a GIF or a GIF? I don't know how you're supposed to say it, but when they send that, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? Does this mean you're coming to work today? You're not coming to work? I don't know what this means, right?
They got a little thermometer in their mouth on the
Right, right. I guess that means they're sick, right? Yeah.
So it's funny you say that because I come from two schools, right? I remember when I first started off in tech, one of the big things was when and chat rooms came out. And I thought that
Hmm.
was like, oh my God, this is like the best thing. And I remember watching the three-letter acronyms come alive, like LOL and our LOL. Our LOL was, rolling on the floor, laughing out loud. Like
Right,
that was
right.
somebody fell down in the call center and like that happened, right? Like these are things that we made up. Like,
Mhm.
and I remember we were like always trying to figure out, okay, like we were trying to break down the dictionary and shrink things down to put in these chat rooms and talk. And I remember when my daughter texted me LOL for the first time, I was not excited about that. And I was like, but I was there during the precursor and the beginning of it. I literally helped create that language and foster it into this world. And then now that's all they speak in is three-letter acronyms. And now it's even evolved past that. Now we just, as a family, we have a group chat that sends pictures, and that's it.
Right,
And it's just, we're just trying to make each other laugh, or
right.
we respond with emojis. And I don't even know if we have real conversations. So, and I remember the first time when we were sitting down, my daughter looked over me and she goes, "LOL, Dad," and I was like,
Lots of love.
"No, this is the real world. We talk regular here. Like you." At some point, it's just she's just gonna look at me and send a GIF at me, right? And
Right,
just
right,
be like,
right, right,
"Whoop,"
right,
on
right,
my phone, and there's no communication, right?
right,
But
right.
it is wild to see. And to your point, it's interesting because now that she's in management, knowing that she is that generation, she's dealing with it in real time. So she's like, Dad, like they're not coming to work and they're sending me weird messages and everything's over text and no one wants to take my call. And like, I don't know how to deal with this. And it's interesting because it's not just a challenge for us, it's a challenge for the workforce that's managing the workforce
Mhm,
that is the generation. So it's
mhm,
just very interesting to see this kind of come back. But yeah, to your point,
mhm.
hieroglyphics have reemerged for
Right,
sure.
right, right, right,
Well, look at NFTs, right? We're drawing, now we're selling them, right? So everything's up for grabs.
right. Mhm, mhm.
Uh, and I think that, and I think that that's where some of the fun facts lie. And what are some of the things you're thinking of, Jill, when you think of some of the fun facts from boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Zs? Obviously I got my fun stories, but I'm sure you have
Right.
some of yours.
Oh, we could go on for days with this sort of thing. But, you know, when I think about it, it's like this huge social experiment, right? You think
Yeah.
about the things that informed how they behave or why they think the way that they do or the way that they that what comes to work, um, is tied back to some of these things. And for lack of a better generation to pick on, here I go with the millennial generation. But This is a generation that came up not like Gen X, in which you could take a pill not to have, right? And very, very small generation, and mom and dad both working. Nobody's going to step off the career ladder to do the whole family thing and that sort of thing. So then the bounce back was to create the millennial generation, which they were very loved. They were the babies on board. Don't hit my car. You could have hit me yesterday, but now I have the sign in here because this precious cargo is in my
Yeah.
car. And but the way that we invested in them was very different than parents had invested in children before, right? The generation just before is the first latchkey kids. Let yourself in, make your own macaroni and cheese. Just have the trash cans put away and your bed made before I get home, or something like that, right?
And before the lights go out. Yeah.
Right. But here's what's really interesting, because that's what showed up at work, right? I didn't
Yeah.
need mom at home. Don't need you here. Give me my instructions. Back off. Don't micromanage me. Leave me alone. You want it at 3, I'll have it at 3. If I do it at 2 to get it ready for 3, that's on me. That's me, because I just had to have the trash cans put away by 6:30. I got home at 3. I had all that time to have agency over when I was going to put the trash can away. So I expect that here at the office. But then with the millennial generation, this is one: talk to mama before you make big decisions. Let's talk about it. We're going to go on this prescription, but it's okay. But I'm going to need you to tell your teacher. I'm going to need you to tell your counselor. I'm going to need you to tell the nurse. I'm going to need you to tell all these people, And so this is a generation that shares a lot, right? They tell you what they have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner on the, where they're at, what they're doing, all the time. But it's really been because we ask for that information all the time.
Wow.
So why on earth would they come to work and then be quiet about it, right? Why on earth would they not want to share at work? Because that's just the way that seems natural and most common and obvious. So why wouldn't they want to talk to us about everything? We had them talking, from a very, very early age. They opined into everything. Where do we go for dinner? What sport do you want to play? Where are we going on vacation? All of these kinds of decisions were made, in group with their ideas very much considered. So when this generation comes to work, they want to be heard. You don't necessarily have to do what they put out there, but they have that need to be heard because they've been listened to all along. They had the ear of their teacher, their coach, their preacher, their parents, their everybody, right?
That's so big. And I really want everyone to hear what you just said, because I don't really think that as we come into work and we think that, hey, I'm going to empower you to be successful. I say that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I often say that if one is the problem, if the problem equals one is the problem. Sorry. And I do that. So I'm trying to empower others to be successful. It's like, here, I'm going to give it to you. You tell me what you think. If you want to talk about it, that's totally fine. But don't bring me the problem and ask me what you want me to do about it. Right.
Right.
And that's always been my mantra. And again, that's the generation that I grew up in, the way I found success in my generation, but it's different in the modern generation. And so listening more and talking less is so much of a different mindset and shift.
Mm-hmm.
I want to keep going. I'm diving into this. I'm geeking out on this whole topic because I'm all about psychology of people, and I love cracking the code. But let's just stop for a second. I want to go back to our trivia question for the day. Jill, what is our trivia question for today?
So it was something about which is the largest generation by percentage in the workforce today.
Yeah. What current generation, down here on the screen, what current generation makes up the largest percent of the U.S. workforce? You got 3 choices. Well, technically you got more than that, but put it in the chat. A couple lucky winners are going to win today. 2 free tickets to Build It Live 2022 coming at you this year, July 27th through 29th, where we're going to get to dive into this really specially with you, Jill. I'm excited about your topic that you're going to be talking about at the event. One of the big things I think we want to cross the chasm of is some of the tips and tricks. I think you're really unlocking some stuff today, and hopefully those that are participating or following along, or those that are going to be listening later, are paying attention, because I think there's so many key elements of what you're saying that's really helping out, really understanding where we're going. But let's talk about it.
Yeah.
What are some of the big things that it is leading into this we kind of grazed across earlier in the current landscape, but
Mhm.
obviously the great resignation's coming. We got, there's a lot of turmoil on the horizon. We are seeing massive amounts of layoffs.
Mhm.
Um, Talk to me a little bit about that. Like, what do you think, and how as business owners can we hedge our bets here? And what are some of the ways to success here?
Right. All of that notwithstanding, we were just talking about communication, right?
Yeah,
When some of these generations come and they want to talk about it, they want to talk about things. I think that that's at the heart of a relationship between the employer and the employee is that communication. We see a ton of headlines about trust and transparency and all that sort of stuff. Well, what's the root of that? That's conversation, right? It's
yeah,
communication. And I think that the more that we can be as open and as upfront with our people, making it easy for them to understand our position, our decisions, and what we're doing, not leaving things to assumptions or questions or going unspoken. I think that we can do a lot with that to shore up our talent pool to keep the people with us, right? Because in the absence of information, people start to make things up, and they always make it up much worse than what the reality is, right?
agreed.
Um, but I think the more that we can communicate with our folks about why they should work at our company, why they should stay at our company, why they came, what's good, what scratches their itches, um, it is super important. So if there's one message, it's around that idea of communicating. Back to that idea with the multiple generations in the workforce, I think the communication styles, I think the messaging may have to change. It's not a one size fits all world anymore, right? And we
Right.
just spent 2 years, all of us individually, deciding what was going to be important to us, right? And so now we've got all these people with these different opinions about what's important. And I think as leaders of organizations, it's incumbent upon us to figure out how do I best communicate with this person so that they understand that I
Mhm.
appreciate them, they can see their line as to why they're important to me and why I want them to stay with me. And I think when they feel cared for in that way, communicated with in a way, that's respectful and just engenders that trust, then you're going to have these people who are going to be more engaged in your organization. More engaged employees attract other high performers to your organization because they can
Yeah.
see them participating and doing well for their company, and other people will want what they have, right?
Yeah.
And that'll bring people to us. My understanding with that whole great resignation piece is there were tons of movement. It started out with people just deciding to skip out of the workforce altogether or to make
Yeah.
very big changes in how they looked at work, dialing it back a little bit, not being as involved as they once were, stepping back in their role, right? And then we've moved to this idea of well, hey, they're going to offer more money over there. They're going to offer more this. They're going to offer more that. I
Yeah.
want to go over there. The idea of the remote versus have to come into the office, and some companies making a line in the sand, and people are like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And so making choices based on flexibility and all that. So they saw what they thought were better opportunities. But my understanding, if my intel is correct, that we've got a significant number of that group that made a change during the great resignation, and they're already ready to change again, or they are currently changing. I'm going to say that had to do with how a lot of companies onboarded somebody. If they were really desperate for talent and needing to bring people in, they probably had very little bandwidth to help onboard these people in a way. And so the
Yeah.
people make the move and they're like, wait, this isn't better than what I left. These
Yeah.
people don't care about me. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm lost here. And so they're thinking, might have to move again. So if you lost people, maybe now would be a good time to call them and ask them how it's going because they might want to come back.
You might want to come back. I love that tip too. And I love what you're saying because I have seen people do that. And, I heard people saying, if you didn't look for a job during the great resignation, you may have left 17% increase on the table, or all these different numbers have been thrown out there to kind of, stir the making a different move. But one of the things, Jill, and I will say, is even as an employer, as an employee, you know, I even as an employer, I always consider myself an employee, and it's always important. And one of the big pieces of advice and I'm going to ask you here in a second for a couple people thinking about it. This is two ends of the stick, right? Yeah, you may not be happy where you're at, but in my career to truly understand what made me happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, and it helped me to craft companies and build opportunities and really listen to those that I wanted in those strategic places to fill those spots. I was paying attention to what drove them. But I needed people to understand it. I would always flip the question back on them and say, look, I'm not, they'd ask me, what does this job pay? And I'd say, well, hold on a second. How much are you worth? And that's where they would be like, no one's ever asked me that. I'm asking you. And I think that you
Mm-hmm.
have to be cognizant of what it is that you're doing, why you're doing it, the way that you're doing it. So this is, even though we're talking about businesses and how to move your people forward, hopefully there's people that are thinking about this on the other end of the stick as an employee. What is it that you really want? That's where a lot of this disappointment came, and not doing enough due diligence in that process to measure what I have versus where I'm going. And I think there's some things to be learned there. But what, from your perspective, obviously that's just my little lens. This is your profession. What do you think table stakes are for today, and what
Mm-hmm.
can businesses do, and maybe even employees do, to kind of make a meaningful transition, or maybe even find happiness in where they're at?
Mhm, mhm. Well, so I mean, some of the table stakes, some of the things that we're looking for is, it's again that communication, that feedback. And sometimes when I tell people, you've got to give your employees some feedback. You've got to give them an opportunity. And I get this huge eye roll because I think some people think feedback, oh, it's a performance review. I've got to clean off my desk. We have to have a form. It has to be all official. I have to close the door. I was like, no, it's the ebb and flow of conversation, right? That's how
Yeah,
easy this could be. You don't have to put a lot into it, but it's that availability for a conversation,
right,
right? And then just conversing through what's going on, how are things progressing. So feedback slash communication, whatever you want to call it, that trust and transparency. I don't think that you have to feed your employees through a fire hose for all the details of the inner workings of your organization, but
right,
they do need to know stuff that's actionable for them or it applies to them. I think being able for people to understand what their role is and how impactful their role is. What I have to explain a lot of times to people is like, we wouldn't create a job for you if you weren't important. We don't just make jobs and pay people for grins and giggles, right? Like we've got a real need for you, and so making sure that they understand how important their role is, regardless of what it is, but what happens downstream, upstream from them, and where they fit in the whole thing, and then what could be next for them. One of the things that fuels
right,
resignations, voluntary terminations, is they're not investing in me, they're not developing me as a professional, right? And so and then when we all get super super busy and we're stretched really really thin, what do we give up on first? Professional development, right? We like, oh, we don't have time to go to those seminars, oh, we don't have time for that, we don't have the money for that, we don't have. And then that creates this, swinging, we're we're not doing what our employees need and what we need in developing our people, right? So if there's another takeaway, it's like, don't ever let your foot off that pedal, right? That you need to be investing in your people. It only serves to help you as an organization too, right? Because that rising tide thing, lifting all boats, matters. So those are some of the things that I would encourage a business owner to be mindful of as we start to think about what can I do to kind of brace my organization. For some people, money really does. Face it, we all work for money on some level, right?
true,
We don't. Otherwise, I just stay in bed all day, right? But but it's not always the determining factor for most people. It's a piece of the pie. That's the thing that also frustrates me when I talk to people and they say, "Well, they left me for more money." Well, yeah, okay. They probably did, maybe. But what I understand is only about a third of the jobs that are being offered offer that really big swing in what my salary is today to what it could be if I move over there. Most of them are the same kind of raise that they might get in an annual review, right?
Yeah.
It's and some are even leaving for lateral moves. So, but they're going to tell you it's for more money because that's the expedient way to answer your question. That you're not going to question them. You're going to go, oh well, I can't argue with that, and I don't have any more money to pay you. So, okay, I get it. You're leaving for more. But my question to business owners is what made them listen to that recruiter talk to them about more money? What made
Yeah.
them go online and look at the job board for jobs that make more money? Might have been a personal situation. Okay, get it. But usually there's something else that makes them dissatisfied enough to listen or to look.
I've said this a number of times on stage, in person, virtually everywhere else, is that during the Great Resignation, people voted with their employment because they didn't see success with the organization that they were at. And they oftentimes say the only number that they're giving is I got paid more, is because that's the only negotiation factor that the organization's willing to negotiate against. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, am I willing to change my culture? Am I willing to allow you to work from home? Am I willing to allow you to do all these other things? None of that is negotiable. It's salary.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing I see is 3 to 6% of future operational opportunity in here, and that's not enough for these in this modern
Mm-hmm.
era. And I got a question. You said something earlier, and I want to stop you because you were on you were just dumping nuggets of
Right.
opportunity. I was like, God, those are so good. But I want to go back to it. I want to ask you a question. Are you seeing the performance review wean from what it used to be, where we sat down and like, okay, here's a piece of paper based on this job title, and you didn't do this or you didn't do that, or hey, I need to put you on a performance improvement plan,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever that is. This is why you
Mm-hmm.
didn't get your 3%. Is that still
Yeah, I
as
think what we
commonplace?
see now, yeah, is uh, a variety of tools used in that performance management um, uh, conversation. And it is that constant feedback. It is fixing something much more in the moment than waiting for that, 8 more months until the annual review when I mentioned something to you and you're like, I don't even remember
Yeah, and
that
they only do it.
situation.
They
So,
do it in the
okay,
last 3 months.
right. I've moved on from there. But
I was wondering.
that correction in the moment, is super important. Um, not waiting necessarily for the annual review to give an increase if something warrants that, or a spot bonus or whatever those tools are. But there's still, I think, a need for a sit down,
Yeah,
um, you know, at least once a year to where we say, okay, here's where we're at. Here's where we need to be. What are we going to do to get us from here to there? And that idea of career pathing and having those kind of conversations with our employees
yeah,
about what's next, what could potentially be. You had said something about, you use the word success.
yeah,
And I have a picture of what success looks like in my head. But
yeah.
what my success looks like and what yours, Juan, looks like could be completely different. And generationally, success
For,
may look very, very different, right? So it's having that communication enough, that feedback in those conversations enough to know, what does success look like for this person, and their
yeah,
success and the person sitting next to them, very, very different. So having those opportunities at least once a year to have those kind of conversations about the what's next. It might not be climbing that ladder like we're used to. It might be, what they do over there in marketing looks really kind of interesting. I might want to go try that. And what transferable skills do you have? What do we need to reskill? What do we need to upskill? Where do we need to be in order to help make you successful here at our organization? And so there will always, I think, need to be those kind of conversations.
yeah.
And so I see a need for a performance review, as well as ongoing conversations, whether they're one-on-ones or quarterly meetings or monthly meetings or whatnot. But yeah.
It's interesting that I'm curious because you have such a wide view of the industry in regards to like that whole segment. And I was just, I felt like there's something there, like there's some traditional type organizations. We only go based on what we've learned, right? And so sometimes we don't have the opportunity, and that's why, at Build It, one of the learn a lot of different ways, and I'm looking forward to having you there because you're going to expose the audience to so many new thought processes that can improve their business. And even today's conversation, some of the tips and tricks, some of this stuff is gold. I'm like, we should have you on more often. Amazing stuff. But one of the things I will say too is, as you're talking about communication loops back, I'm curious, how often are you seeing performance based um, plans actually implement shorter period of time, and removing that annual review component where it's just like an ongoing performance based, like, hey, here's the next little step to take, and kind of stepping your way forward, and just like this really big communication chain in regards to the success of that individual as they reach those marks, they're celebrated internally, and then just this annual non-celebrated event where you can't go back and tell your employees, and then that gamification component where they're actually, everyone's celebrating everyone else's success. How is that shaping up? Do you see that?
Yeah. So I would say that the annual review type meeting, that thing that we picture in our head, would be the launch pad for some of that. But it means that you've got to take seriously whatever is discussed in that moment, and you've got to remember it. And you got to remember it for this employee and that employee over there. And so it has to be a living, almost like a living document, right? Where you're mindful of this sort of thing, so that in those feedback conversations that you have throughout, that it's part of the discussion, right? Remember when we were talking about you doing this? Well, I think if you could take this project and blah, 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 maybe that would give you an opportunity to practice this or blah, blah, but tie the things back to, so people understand this is important for my success. This is important for my growth. If I do it this way, or I learn that. So it's just constant. But I think kind of that annual review would be the place where I would start my, okay, let's rethink what we're doing here, and let's point us in a direction that we can get there from here. And we'll spend the whole year having these mini conversations that lead us to the end result that we're looking for. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious. Okay. How, I mean, are you seeing gamification subsidized in there? I see that a lot of these new.
Yeah, you know what we see a lot of things. It's an opportunity to earn a badge, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
But not necessarily that they're having to play a game to earn the badge, right?
No.
But when we smash our companies flat, and we don't have a lot of places where they can grow, right? We're going to have this layer of people. There's one manager, there's one this and one that, and there's not a lot of opportunity, not a lot of headroom there. Those badging, or that gamification, learning something a little bit more and getting to put a badge on my signature, on my LinkedIn profile, on my cubicle, if I have a cubicle, whatever, to be able to demonstrate an area of expertise, can give you a way to take, and say you had a tech job and you had tech 1, tech 2, tech 3, tech 4. So you're building a little bit of differentiation in there, and using gamification or badging as a way to move through the ranks, still in that same, this same layer, but it gives you something to work towards, and a way to kind of demonstrate your expertise.
It's interesting that you say that, because I'm curious, because I have 2 different age daughters, and both of them are very different in the way that they want to work and the way that they want to play. And I think about the career path that they originally thought. They thought I wanted to go down this traditional mechanism, and I said, look, don't try to make yourself something. Embrace who you are and what you love to do, and be who you are, and really just kind of go down that path. And it's interesting to see as they embraced who they were, and the type of career, and the different ways and the mechanisms. Because one of them was like, oh, Dad, I'm going to go through school. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then when she was struggling, I pick your path. And now she's doing something completely different, and she went right into the workforce, and now she's super successful doing it. And it's like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And I think that as business owners, we have to think the same way. Right. And I'm curious, because I want to ask you this question. is, as we start to see this shift and these new models and these new people coming into the workforce, we're also dealing with the outflow. And I'm curious, you probably have the stats. Do you happen to know what the current unemployment rate is?
Well, yeah, and it's moving because I was just watching the stock market shows yesterday, and the
Yeah.
number of layoffs that started to add up on there. I was like, brrr, I wasn't adding them up personally, but really, what we're at, and area by area, it can be a little bit different, right? Regionally, we have some different
Yeah.
numbers. Even within a state, you're going to have some different numbers, but we are at what most of us would consider full employment right now, right? Like,
Okay.
there's not a high level of unemployment. Um, Again, I think that this is a number that is going to be moving significantly over the next few months. Um, because you can get, when you start getting below a number that's got a 4 in front of it, you're talking about people. There is nobody else in the job market, but that 4 is just a natural place to be.
Yeah.
But it does demonstrate full employment. Those people who might be off for a period of time or something like that, you get under a 2 number and there is nobody available anymore. Those are the chronically unemployed, that are on that list. But we're in a very natural place to kind of hang out right now, of what most of us would describe as full employment. So those passive candidates, if we're looking to add to our roles, it's the passive candidate that's going to be our target, not as much somebody who's sitting on unemployment and making a move. I say
You,
that. And
yeah,
then
no,
with what's going on with technology and the tech companies, I you know I I need to be careful there, because
no,
there
and
are
it's
going to be
really,
good people on unemployment here pretty soon.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, and I totally get it. And I think that you had mentioned something earlier. I mean, I hate to negativity to any conversation about anything, and my prayers and heart go out to every single person that's looking for that opportunity, or the companies that are struggling to find those people. But here's what you had mentioned something a little while ago, and I picked up on it, and I'm just curious what your thoughts are on this. Is those are toying with it, and you have an intern shirt on today.
I
Like, I
do.
love the fact that you're doing intern day there at Insperity. And from that, you're taking people that are in one area and you're giving them an opportunity to do something else, or maybe they're upskilling, you're giving them some cross pollination. How common are you seeing companies actually break down the job description silo and just say, you know what, I'm going to allow my people to just kind of spread across all these open areas and see where their passion lies? Is that something that you're seeing, or do you?
Well, I don't know that I would describe it exactly like that, but I do think that there is a lot of attention being paid to what I would call internal mobility within an organization. I
Okay.
would much rather, as a manager, I would much rather lose my employee to a job across the hall than across the street, right?
Okay.
So understanding that as an organization, we've invested in this individual. We want them to stay with us, right? And they've proven to be a good employee. So we want them to be with us, but it's that opportunity to see where other things might be. Not that I would break down the wall and half the morning I'm going to do this, and over there on Thursday I'm going to do something completely different, but to allow that opportunity to evaluate different kinds of jobs within the organization. So I might do this job and I might go over here, which would not have been a normal career path, right,
Right.
for most people, the way they think about it, but opening that up. And as managers to managers, recognizing transferable skills.
Right.
Getting out of that box to say, you haven't done this for 10 years, you can't possibly do it. Oh, heck. You know, most of the time there's some transferable skills in there. There's something that would, and maybe getting some fresh ideas would be just what the doctor ordered, right?
Yeah, and I a lot, not a lot of people know that, but I was a programmer for many years. There's no way I would go back to do programming, no way. But I could, right? And I think that if times got tough and I needed to create something, I might be able to get back there and make a mess out of things. But to your point, it's not like those skills go away. And again, that communication component, like, are we really listening to the people? Do we really know, like, if they're really a creative? Do we really know if they're operational? Do we really know what type of skill? And I got one question. I mean, I don't. Do you guys recommend doing personality assessments and personality profiling in regards to the organization to kind of.
Okay. Yeah. So you're talking to the absolute wrong person we're going to make this for another hour. I am an assessment junkie. I have taken every assessment known to man and probably took them twice. As a matter of fact, just before this, we were doing a core strengths
I
training.
love
I
it.
have I think we did something like 17 sessions of EQ
Holy
just
smoke.
last month. I mean, I was like all day, every day, talking about EQ. So, um, and some of those are personality, some are cognitive, um, and there is value in that, to break down some walls, to understand myself and others in conflict. That's why with the intern class, we're taking them through core strengths, because not only does core strengths talk about, your individual strengths, but it also talks about in times of conflict, what's your go-to. Don't you wish that when you were like 21, 22, somebody was talking to you about how to navigate conflict at the workplace? I mean, that's such an
I dealt
awesome
with
thing
that
for them
forever.
to do.
I dealt
Yeah.
with that for a long time.
Yeah. So, building in those skills early on, I think are fantastic. But using personality, whether it's the disc or, any, and I don't want to pick
No,
one
I
over.
totally get it. I'm not trying to put you on the. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
but I do value, that sort of those sorts of conversations, and getting people to understand kind of what their natural state is, and what their go-to responses might be, because but I think it's important. But here's the thing that I will say about that, and maybe it's a pitch for emotional intelligence. But your IQ, what your IQ was when you were 7 and what it's going to be when you're 67, not a lot of movement there, right? Your capacity to learn is pretty much stagnant, and it does count for something at work, but it's only what, it's a minor percentage of your technical competence, is only just a little bit of the piece of the pie.
yeah,
Your personality, knowing what that is. Again, that's kind of set. By the time you're in the workforce, you're probably, you are who you are, right? And so you can't wiggle there, very much. Important to know, and important to know how I can get the best out of myself, and to be able to recognize when things aren't going exactly right. But that emotional intelligence piece,
yep,
that's a skill that you can work on and continue to work on. And all the
yeah.
evidence is showing that it's like 60% of your success in a work environment can be tied back to your level of emotional intelligence. So that's really, I think that's where I would spend some time and energy. And I think as organizations, if we can spend some time and energy in that space, everything rises. When your emotional intelligence rises, your stress levels go down,
Yeah,
your
yeah.
ability to manage your time and your commitments goes up. It has such an impact on so many different things. And I think as organizations, if we can really clue into that, and we can have our folks working in an optimal environment, I mean, there'd be no stopping us.
I love it because I talk about it all the time, and one of the biggest decisions I made was to find out whether or not I was the right kind of leader to lead my teams. And
Hmm.
I'm a very, if I can give any advice, and I know that this is your webinar here, but today, but this being a self-aware leader is probably one of the biggest things that I think that if you're trying to build a business, it's just get honest with who you are as a leader, and then you can start looking at every other piece of the business and really understanding it. So I love what you said, because that just unlocks the onion in so many different ways. There's so many, you're might try to bend your arm to try to get you to do that at build it in some fashion, because that is a huge topic. I just
Yeah.
But with that being said, what are some of you've given us so many great nuggets today. God, I'm just still reeling about it. I'm going to have to go back and watch and make sure I capture everything of what you talked about. But what are some of the resources that maybe you or Insperity have that can help out business owners today that are maybe not dealing with it? Maybe they see it on the horizon. Maybe it's coming. They can feel it and they
Hmm.
want to deal with it. What are some of the things they can do?
Yeah. So I think just to have another opinion, or to look at, some new ideas, or just to look at an old idea in a new way. I'm going to be a huge proponent for saying go to our blog site, because we
Okay.
have experts throughout anything that touches your people, right? From the management of those people to, how to organize your company and all those, like everything, stem to stern. There's somebody who's written a blog post about it. It's so robust. And I would say if you just wanted to spend some time and try to get nuggets, you know, to be able um, to check out our blog site would be one of the very first resources that I would go to. And then, with the connection between our organization and yours, there's a lot of opportunity just to reach out, to ask, and to get some advice, and then to see if there's more to it, and that there could be something that would be built. But I think if you were just looking for ways to think about something in a new way, or what other people are doing, or what best practice might be, um, my number one go-to would be our blog. Lord, I check out our blog all the time. When somebody asks me a question, I'm like, I wonder what somebody else has to say. So I go straight to blog.
That's a good idea. Don't, if you're the smarter person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And with the amount of information that you have that spans all of cyberverse, if you will, the universe, the data world we live in, having great information to be able to like really get down to the nitty gritty and find
Hmm.
good information is a big one. So thank you for creating that, because it's big, and I'll have to go check out the blog
Right. There you
myself. So do one last run at our trivia question, because we're going to circle to the end here. And our trivia question for today was, what current generation makes up the largest percentage of the U.S. workforce? And we're going to get two lucky winners. They're going to win tickets to Build It Live 2022 coming up. Jill from Insperity joining us, and her team coming in. Shout out to the team that's coming. Oh, we got Carrie Green popped in here with millennials. Don't. We got Tiffany in
go.
here talking about some baby boomers. One of the and Jill, just in closing here, I'm curious,
Mhm.
what are some of the things and anything that you might want to share that we haven't covered? What are maybe, is there anything that we didn't touch on? And I mean, we probably have two more webinars at least built into what you talked about today. But is there anything that maybe a tip or a trick, other than all the great stuff? Is there anything that just burns inside of you? Obviously, you're doing
Yeah,
the
yeah.
intern stuff today. What's one thing that that you'd like to tell everybody?
Okay, man. I think what I would want people to understand is, in our roles as business leaders, our job is really to clear away the clutter so that the people who we hire to do the things can actually do the things, right? And so some of that clutter and some of the distractions and some of the reasons, the obstacles for them to be able to do what it that we hired them to do may have to do with the environment that we have them working in. So we have to be sensitive to that and remove those kind of distractors, or things that might take them away from their job number one, right? So if they're worried about the security of their job, if they're worried about what's going on in the marketplace, if they're concerned about not being heard at the office, those sorts of things will take their eye off the ball. And that's why I say, as leaders, it's important for
Wow,
us to know our people so that we can help them to be the best that they're supposed to be.
I love that a lot.
I would-
Oftentimes I guarantee we're so high up on the totem pole in regards to problems and issues, or even, maybe, whatever it is in our daily business life, that
Mhm.
we often probably don't actually see. Really love that advice. Inside of the private chat, you're going to notice there, Jill, there's a couple
Yeah,
of
I
people, I
saw.
think. But before we announce who it is, I want to know the answer to our trivia question, and then we're going to announce the winners. You're going to announce them, but I have to know, what is the answer to today's trivia question? Current generation makes up the largest percent of the U.S. workforce today.
It'd be those dadgum millennials.
Oh,
It's the ones that we keep scratching our heads. But yeah, they are the largest part of the workforce right now. Baby boomers for a long time held that title, but I don't even know. I think that, like, every 7, 9 seconds or something, there's a baby boomer that's retiring. There's
yeah.
some kind of number like that. And we lost a full on extra 1 million during the pandemic of baby boomers who just said, yeah, I'm done. I'm checking out
Wow.
now. I don't want to live
Mm,
through all
that,
this.
oh my
Um,
gosh.
and they could, right? Because stock market was still up, housing prices
Yeah.
were doing well, so they were in a place where retirement looked a little bit easier. I don't know if they're going to come back here in the in the foreseeable future, but we lost even more baby boomers than we had originally planned for. So those of you who have that generation in your workforce, part of what we'll talk about when we're together um, next month is about like how do I set myself up for them leaving, other people coming in. What do I need to look for to kind of prepare over the next 3, 5, 8 years as the complexion of my workforce changes dramatically.
Wow. I'm going to sit in there. I promise you, I will be there with my pen and paper, writing down some notes. So, Joe, we got a couple of lucky winners. Who are our lucky winners today?
So Carrie Green and Alex Ramsby, come on down.
Yeah. Congratulations, you guys. You guys got 2 tickets, compliments of Insperity to come to Build It Live 2022, July 27th to 29th next month. And you guys get to see Jill live. I can't wait to see the picture of you guys taken together with Jill. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, can't wait to meet you guys.
Yeah, that'd be really fun. So, Jill, it has been an amazing pleasure. So many things going on here. Yes, exactly. Carrie, I agree. So many great nuggets. I really like the clear the way the color. It, I would love to just do that to my desk some days. Some days bad. And I
It's a
think
sign
that
of
happens
genius
in
if
our,
it's on your desk. That's what I've been told.
and that's the thing in business, though. It's like oftentimes when we don't stop and look, we don't realize how did it get this bad. And I love what you said, Jill. There was so much about so many gems in there. I can't wait to get on social and just share that stuff out. So thank you for joining me. It was such a pleasure today.
Thank you. Always a good time.
Well, I look forward to having you. Don't forget, everybody, you remember that those of you that want to, today only, register for Build It Live at Build It Live dash or build it dash live.net. God, I don't know how I keep forgetting that. And today's code is going to be Insperity 200. So for all you that are registering, thank you, Insperity, for joining us. Thank you for the discount code for all those that want to participate. We're looking forward to seeing you guys coming up here next month. I can't wait to see you all in person. Great time. And again, thank you, Insperity. Thank you, Jill, for being with us
No
today.
worries. Yeah, it was fun.
All
Aloha.
right. We'll see you soon.
Okay.
Goodbye, everybody.